I'm pleased to have the chance to speak to you today and give thanks to Green Space Scotland and Glasgow City Council for bringing us together, all kindly supported by partners in the European Union. And while we can only be together virtually, having Glasgow, which of course means Dear Green Place in Gaelic, is a suitably named backdrop for today's discussions. This virtual gathering is a reminder, as if one were needed, of just how challenging life still remains as we continue to respond to the global pandemic. It's now a year since those of us here in Scotland went into lockdown. A year since the world changed forever and our lives became heavily restricted. A milestone like this gives us a chance to reflect on that and, importantly, a chance to consider how we choose to move forward. And this is important because while the impact of COVID has been and continues to be harsh and traumatic, we have also seen some actions and activities that we don't want to lose. We saw partnership and collaboration happen at a pace and scale that many of us across public life have been trying to coax and encourage for some time. We saw a flourishing of activity in our communities. We saw a drop in commuting levels, and we saw a reconnection with nature as people got out and explored the green space around them. We all had to rapidly change how we did things, and even though the unfortunate prompt was a nasty virus and a global pandemic, that shift in policy and behaviours, that trust that we place in our communities, and that decoupling from the shackles of red tape are actually not things that we want to lose. So this experience and the opportunity that we have to disrupt what we might describe as an I-beam culture is too precious to miss. Because if we grab it and harness it, the outcomes and the outlook for our people, our communities and country start to look more positive. It's never been enough to simply recover from this pandemic, but to instead reform what we do and reimagine what we want to become. Because while there has been a flourishing of activity and good practice and community endeavour, and while everyone has been impacted by COVID, we all of us know that it has been those with least that have been impacted the most. COVID brought into sharp relief the persistent inequalities that exist in Scotland and across the UK. Everyone was urged to stay at home, with a safe and secure home suddenly becoming a public health tool. It was a whole lot easier if you had a home and if that home was safe, warm and secure, was connected to the internet, if you had a secure job, or if you had a garden or green space in which you could get out in, enjoy and importantly, feel safe in. So recovery from this pandemic won't ever be enough if all that ends up happening is reverting back to normal, when that normality has failed too many for too long, and where there seems to have been a tacit acceptance that inequality is somehow inevitable. There is a chance now to start to do things differently, to embrace the positive change that we've seen and to build forward with activity to rebalance our economy and refocus on what matters with people and good quality green places at its heart. We should seek to ensure our recovery is green. Focus has rightly been placed on the impact of COVID, but the climate emergency has never left us. Therefore, we should use this moment to build from the much more heightened awareness and appreciation of the environment around us and the well-being that green space and nature brings. And as we move to recovery, the restorative power of nature should not be ignored as part of the healing that we all need to do. That is why, through our programme for government, we've committed to supporting 20-minute neighbourhoods, where people can meet their needs within a 20-minute walk from home, including access to green space, enabling people to live better, healthier lives, and supporting our net zero ambitions. And in Housing to 2040, our 20-year housing strategy, we have a focus on the delivery of new affordable homes. But we also recognise the need to also create great places and spaces for people to live, grow and play in. The last year's experience has taught us just how important and crucial it is to get that right. Scottish Government respects the role of nature-based solutions and the multifunctional benefits they can offer. National infrastructure is already integrated in many of our infrastructure programmes such as housing and regeneration, flood, water and drainage management and active travel. We've made some significant injections of funding to support it. Our infrastructure investment plan sets out a long-term vision of infrastructure in Scotland, which supports an inclusive net zero carbon economy and includes details on over £26 billion of major projects and large programmes. With overwhelming support through our earlier consultation, we now have the widest definition of infrastructure in the UK and many parts of the world that includes natural infrastructure. This means we can take a more holistic view of our infrastructure assets and recognise the wider contribution that nature can have in creating sustainable places, reducing emissions and improving well-being. These complement our investments of almost £9 billion for environmental sustainability and the transition to net zero emissions. This includes £2 billion dedicated to tackling climate change through our low carbon fund, which provides support for woodland creation, peatland restoration and the reuse of vacant and derelict land. All of these are critical to delivering the infrastructure needed for our transition to net zero by 2045. Our statement of intent for biodiversity sets the direction for a new biodiversity strategy which will respond to the increasing urgency for action to tackle the twin challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss. It highlights the benefit of nature-based solutions such as woodland restoration and creation, peatland restoration and urban green infrastructure for people and nature. And that's why we've committed £250 million over 10 years on peatland restoration and an additional £150 million over the next 5 years in forestry. We're also committed to realising the potential of tiny forests in Scotland, which can support biodiversity and improve urban green space for local communities. We've also welcomed the Vacant and Derelict Lands Task Force recommendations and will work with the Scottish Land Commission and other stakeholders to develop proposals to help deliver a culture change in Scotland's approach to vacant and derelict land. As part of that, I am pleased to announce from this week our new £50 million low carbon vacant and derelict land investment programme is open to applications for funding. This programme will help with tackling persistent vacant and derelict land, delivering regeneration and supporting a green recovery, in turn promoting social justice and well-being across Scotland, especially in more disadvantaged areas. And given the flourishing of our communities as they rolled up their sleeves during the last year to look after each other, it's right that we continue to empower them to support their efforts to tackle climate change. That's why we've committed to developing a network of climate action towns that will exploit the co-benefits of climate action, empowering communities to develop greener, healthier, more livable places, whilst contributing to Scotland's response to the global climate and ecological emergencies. We're also working on the next National Planning Framework, NPF4. It's Scotland's spatial plan and will include a review of our planning policy. And some of the most significant policy changes we expect to explore in developing NPF4 will be expanding green infrastructure and natural places, new policies to promote an infrastructure first approach, including green and blue infrastructure, and support for 20-minute neighbourhoods. The pandemic and the desire for a green recovery has prompted us to rethink our neighbourhoods, our towns, our cities and rural communities, to rethink how we live and to reassess what is important to us. And it's clear that nature-based solutions can offer us a different way of doing things that are sustainable and good for the soul and good for our well-being. To deliver this green, fair and human rights-based recovery, government cannot do it on our own, and that's why it is essential that we work in partnership with empowered communities in order that local approaches and contexts are reflected, and because, quite simply, our communities are the experts in what their needs and their aspirations are. Aristotle said, "In all things of nature there is something of the marvellous," and he's right. We have a chance to rebuild a marvellous future, and empowered communities and nature need to be at its heart. Have a great day.